Oh, come on, we can do better. Good morning.
Good morning.
That's better. That's better. All right. Well, Sid, thank you so much for that introduction. I can tell you I'm extremely excited to be here. I've been coming to ARC events for so many years. This Monday has been extremely exciting to watch it grow over the years and really mature and become even more relevant every single year as we continue the discussion. So thank you very much for that warm welcome. See if this works. Oh, I think I just got somebody in the eye over there. Yeah, sorry about that. I'll read the slides to you since you won't be able to see them now. Yeah. All right. So yeah, you can read bios online. Just a little bit about SANS Institute. We're an organization that is focused on workforce education, specifically around cybersecurity. We're over a 30-year-old organization, and we really grew up focusing on this trend and these emerging needs in organizations to begin grappling with risks as they affect their enterprise. And over the years, we've of course evolved and really begun to address some of the newer challenges. And of course, many of you are here to talk about operational technology systems. I imagine that many of you are here to also talk about IT-oriented systems and of course how those come together. And SANS has really built our organization to be able to have discussions around this topic and work with individuals and organizations to build their capabilities to grapple with the challenges that we experience every day. Okay, so I figured just to start off here, I just wanted to tell everybody in the room that it is my fault. Security is my fault because I'm a human, and I will tell you, I have to point at all of you because it's equally your fault because you're humans as well. And I think what many of you likely recognize is that the challenges that we face are not just technology challenges. And I picked off a survey from Dell here that just puts things into perspective for us, the human nature that we have to really address as we begin to think of addressing risk in the critical infrastructures, the critical control systems, and everything that now drives our lives. So you can read some of those statistics, but some key ones here. If you're instructed by your superior to share confidential information, would you share it? You can see some statistics relating to that. So it's my fault. I feel better, by the way. Just wanted to get that out right away. So the world continues to change. That's not surprising. And I like to think of organizations today as this iceberg model. And that waterline to me is what still is a separation between our business enterprises and what the businesses actually often do. And that's an important distinction because, of course, what's below that waterline is a very complex beast. We have so many operations that are interdependent in order to run the operations of our companies. And that information is, of course, feeding the upper part of that iceberg. And the upper part is what is visible to the rest of the world. And what's important here is that's where our brand is. That's how we're perceived by our customers, by those that depend upon us. But even our customers and some of the constituents that depend on us don't recognize just how complex our companies are and continue to become. And this is a very important perspective because as we're addressing risk, we need to recognize that we're not only serving the public in one manner, and we have to balance that against how we serve ourselves. So I like to show that picture a lot because it puts things in perspective for how companies really need to recognize the new enterprise that has emerged in their own organizations. We're industrial automation professionals. We're security professionals. Automation is extremely compelling. We get higher safety, increased quality, and we can accelerate our production. These are great benefits with dollar signs next to them. We're reducing our costs and liabilities. These are all the fundamentals of why automation has grown up and just how important it has become to our organizations. However, that compelling aspect comes with costs. And as we start to look at the alphabet soup of ITOT and all the other items that I've listed here, these are the challenges that we're facing. Scale and size matter. The complexity of these systems is something that absolutely has an effect on the risk profile of these systems. Connectivity is really at the core of driving that. So, SANS, we're an educator, but we look at the market a lot. We talk to a lot of folks. We conduct surveys. And this picture is one that is really, you know, like supposed to represent Sid and myself and us taking, you know, a really hard look and can tell you that we have the answer for you today. No, we don't. We don't. But what we have prepared is, let's see if I can get that to fire to the next one. All right, did I get somebody else in the eye? May I have a space bar, please? There we go. Thank you. All right, so SANS conducts annual surveys around industrial control system security. We've been running these for a number of years. It's great because we can see the trends year over years, and you know we have those data points. I want to focus the next few slides here on some data that we acquired through our 2017 survey, and you can go and download this online, of course. And Sid was kind enough to give us a prologue and a preamble on that as well, so just a little plug for Sid. But we had reached out to 200 participants. Well, we reached out to the world, and we had 200 participants come back. And you can see the breakdowns regionally. You can see some of the breakdowns of roles and duties and what their responsibilities are. But I'll focus just for a moment on the responsibility side of who the responders were to this survey. We see a big number of IT, of course, 37%, but look at that hybrid role of IT, OT, these blended roles. Again, this is that waterline in the iceberg and those that are bridging those boundaries, as well as those that are pure OT. So this is important because as we conducted this survey, this tells us that we're reaching, you know, the right people here to help us really understand the challenges and problems. So just as a starting point here, you know, here's an example question. Who in your organization is setting policy for security of your control systems? Now, each of you know where your position is, and this is just representing, you know, the responders to the survey. What I wanted to highlight here is the not C-suite part of these responses, that it's either unknown or it's other in the organization. And policy statements are interesting because this is where governance in the company is really defined. This is oftentimes where things are written to assure compliance and conformity, et cetera. But for organizations that don't know who's writing policy or who may not be writing policy at all, that's a pretty big chunk. Just think of that. 1 out of 3 of these responders across a variety of industries are suggesting that they either don't have policies or they're not writing policies in their organization. The perceived threat level, and again, we run this same campaign to reach out to the market every year. You know, I'm very pleased to see this trend continue to move towards that high and moderate side. If we reach back just 5-6 years ago, the response that we would have seen to the perceived threat level would have been very different. It would have been to that much larger to that low portion. So this is, I think this is important because this actually represents that we're all sensitized to how the market has changed, how the threat levels have changed, how that's affecting us individually. And I anticipate as we run this survey over time that we're going to continue to see that trending to the high side. Okay, I hit it twice, so let's see what happens. All right, so here's a question. There's a lot packed into this question, looking at the threat vectors that are you know, of highest concern or higher concern to the responders. And I just wanted to call out 3 specifically here. That top one is representing the Internet of Things and devices and things that are connecting into their existing control systems, or maybe I could say into your control systems. And one of the concerns here is the ability for those devices to self-defend. Do they have the capability of protecting themselves? Now, it's kind of a loaded question. While that's an important aspect of the device protecting itself, these devices are also connecting into systems, and I believe that's why we're seeing such a high number of responders rate that as one of their tops. Ransomware is another one that I'm calling out here. What's interesting on this is that we're looking at about a third of the responders that have rated that as a very important item to them. This survey was conducted before that spate of ransomware earlier in the middle part of 2017. So we already saw some concerns around ransomware, and that only became more amplified, I'm sure, as some companies actually started to feel those material damages. And lastly, the IT-OT integration, which we all feel, is another one. The importance isn't which one is the highest or the lowest on this chart. This is just calling attention to the items and areas that you think about every day as risk factors that you have to grapple with. So when we think of control systems, the very nature of systems is communications and communication paths. And industrial automation grew up to have open access, seamless bridging and routing in these systems. These are essential elements to communication in a control system. And this is actually the blessing and the curse. It actually leads us to not only achieve our objectives, but it also opens us up to risks. And the way that I look at risks is the convergence of a few different elements here that all line up together. So you have to have a means, an opportunity, and a motive, and then you have to have time, talent, and resources and able to build the capability of affecting something, creating an incident, an attack, or an event. So this is how I think of incidents that are happening to organizations, to the industry. We have to keep in mind that it's the convergence of these elements that actually results in these incidents. And from that, it gives us a higher degree of clarity as to the threats that we're dealing with and what might be on their mind. And we've seen 10 years of evolution of threats. I'm calling out here some of the more sophisticated ones, some of the more memorable ones. We started that march way back in 2008 with Conficker, and regrettably, there's still systems today being affected by something from 2008. And we've seen that march all the way up to very recent events today of these sophisticated attacks. And while we can be awestruck at the level of sophistication, we can debate that all day, the reality is that as things come together, there's plenty of risk for even simple things to affect our systems. And that's why it's important for us to conduct assessments to understand where we are so we can determine where we want to be. So here's another result from that survey. Just looking at when an organization most recently performed their last security assessment. This one is very good news as far as I'm concerned. I just put a 50-50 split there. The results that we saw indicate that some organizations are very aggressively attacking this. Less than 6 months, they're conducting their risk assessments. Now, we have the other 50%, with some of those being never, that may not be able to measure where they are, to know where they are, know where they need to improve. What's important here, though, is part of that trending is that we're seeing more organizations begin to build their programs to understand where they are and make improvements. And there's a unique element that, asking this question again, I would like to understand, is that representing 100%? Is it, let me say it differently. Are these one-off events where I've conducted an assessment of my system and I'm done? Or is there a phased approach or some type of a modular approach where risk assessments are now being applied in some type of a more progressive technique rather than just a one-off? So we'll continue to ask questions like that in the future. I talked about the communications paths and systems, and the pivot is an important factor because that IT-OT convergence, all the benefits that come with that give our attackers an advantage. As soon as they establish a beachhead, they can begin moving and navigating through a system, eventually reaching their whatever their goal is. If we come back to that means, opportunity, and motive. And at SANS, we like to categorize the threats in a couple of manners here. There are threats out there, like Conficker, for instance, that appears to be it's very, very broadly sweeping across and completely agnostic to industries. Contrast those with some of the more sophisticated attacks where we know it wasn't just a particular industry that was being attacked. It was actually a specific company and a specific system and even a specific vintage of a system. So we see those types of contrasts. And for us, it's helpful to put some categories to those that are more opportunistic threats versus those that are more highly tailored. It just helps us really understand what it is that we're dealing with and what we can anticipate to see in the future. And detecting these vulnerabilities is something that is interesting, because you might gravitate to think, well, it's technology that I need to determine vulnerabilities. And that's actually not the case. It's part of an answer. But the whole answer really is a combination of resources and a blending of your people, process, and technology. And as you can see by this chart, there's a variety of resources that are being leveraged to help identify vulnerabilities, either at a device level, at a system level, at an industry level in some cases for business transactions. So I can tell you just by this chart, waiting for ICS vendors to tell us or to send us a patch is a pretty important one. Okay, so any ICS vendors out there, please make sure that you're holding true to keeping that blue bar above that 50% line, because obviously that's an important one. But let's not forget that there are other tools that are emerging and processes that can be put in place that help give us visibility to weak points in our system that can lead to sophisticated attacks. And when we look at the breach and infection incident rates, what we're seeing as results here are more companies are becoming comfortable at identifying, yes, we've been affected, we've been attacked. And this chart is actually, I think, becoming more and more truthful over time, because a few years back, a lot of organizations did not want to be public about their type of infections. So the accuracy of this, we can debate the accuracy here, but I think it's very healthy that companies are at least identifying that they're seeing some type of disruptive, some damage, even potentially some destruction in their systems. So we'll watch that trend, of course, over time. And there's another element here, which is what we call the threat dwell time, which is actually recognizing that your system has been affected by something. And I'm sure you've heard or seen other studies that might use big numbers like 220 days of being infected before someone realized that they're infected. Yeah, those are all truthful, and there's a whole variety of answers there. But as we start to mature and establish processes and programs, what happens is that we are naturally more sensitized to look for potential disruptors in our system. So that threat dwell time should continue to decrease over time. And I'm hopeful that at some point we'll hear from all of you guys as to how some of the programs and investments you're making are paying off, if you're able to have that higher degree of visibility and a higher degree of understanding as to when something actually had its first effects on your system. I think this is an important one, because this helps us get into a position where we're thinking like the attackers, that we're understanding how things can disrupt our systems, and it allows us to be much more proactive at taking steps to address those. This is where I pause. Oh, there we go. Look at that, okay. And right off of threat dwell time, I've been maintaining a running list of companies that have come out publicly to say that they were affected or are affected by WannaCrypt and NotPetya. And I'm confident this is not comprehensive, that I've missed a few, and there might even be a few more, and there's certainly more and more companies that didn't come out publicly. What I've captured here, though, are companies that have publicly identified we've been affected. Some of these organizations have said we're actually going to identify the material damage to our company in dollars. So this is where it starts showing up in annual reports and 10Ks and all of that. And if you add all these up, it's over $1 billion in reported material losses. Big number. Big number from ransomware that locked down a system that reminded us of the importance of having backups and the ability to recover from those. But $1 billion isn't the whole story. The real story are those dominoes. Every one of these organizations, yours included, is part of some larger supply chain. There are companies that depend on you, and you depend on other companies. And a ransomware attack and an effect on an organization has a much greater rippling effect. And this is something that we have to recognize, and that, I believe, is why ransomware continues to rate higher and higher. It's not only are we seeing those material damages, but if your friend in business is affected, and you are depending on that friend to be shipping packages to you or shipping components to you or whatever that is, you're unfortunately going to be affected by that same ransomware. So just, I think it's an understatement to just look at the dollar signs with the companies that have been affected without that perspective of the larger supply chain. Yeah, I think I might have bumped it again here. I'll tell you what, I'm just going to go right here. So this is the last slide, and I wanted to lift the sheets a little bit for you guys in this room. So, my role at SANS is to look across industries, to look for trends in industries, and all around, how do you establish a greater degree of preparedness for grappling with these challenges. And I wanted to lift the sheets here because this is just a snapshot of the type of activity that SANS sees as we start working with our students and with organizations. And what this is showing is that these are some of the type of growth that we're seeing industry by industry. For instance, that oil and gas industry, we saw 80% more activity in oil and gas investing in cybersecurity education last year than we did the year before. Critical manufacturing, we saw an increase. Utilities, power, energy, we saw an increase. And these are just three that I'm highlighting here. This is not to beat our chest in any way. What I wanted to do here is to share this with you because this, to me, is an indication of companies that are understanding the challenge, that are being proactive at building the people capabilities, the workforce capabilities to take on the tough technical challenges and the tough process challenges. So this is, in a way, it's me saying thank you because I believe that we're all maturing here as an industry and across industry. So I wanted to kind of lift the veil just a little bit and share that with you. And then I'll conclude on this slide just to remind everybody it's not a technology problem. And I know as we continue to talk here, you're going to hear over and over just the importance of people, you guys included. So with that, I'll stop here. Okay. Thank you, Doug. Thanks.